Hi, this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. My tutorial today will use mica gum and mica to create a paint to add a sparkle to the fall leaves in our card. It will feature Lavinia's Ginger the Owl. I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. So here are the supplies that I will be using today. We will use a Multifarious Smooth and Supreme by Lavinia. This one has been cut to 4 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches. We will have a frame that we will use around the edge of our card, and this is just cut from cardstock that has been cut down to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. For our card base, I actually chose a sparkly gold cardstock to kind of complement the mica that we're going to be using. I've taken an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock, cut it in half so that we've got 8.5 by 5.5, and then we just fold that in half. For our stamps today, we will be using the Lavinia Ginger Owl. She is LAV 799. Then we will be using the Vine Branch. We'll be just using a portion of it for her to be standing on today. This one will be LAV 811. And then for our leaves around, we will be using the Lavinia Oak Leaf Branch, which is LAV 468. This is one of my favorite stamps for making the leaves. All right, and then we will be making some paint out of mica. And to do that, we will start out with the Sweet Poppy mica gum, and then we'll be adding our mica powder to it, and I will show you how to do that during the process. We will also be using our basic stamps for the different colors. We will be using Distress Inks Stormy Sky for a light background. Then we will have quite a few shades of brown that we're going to use. We've got the Ground Espresso, Vintage Photo, Walnut Stain, Brushed Corduroy, Tea Dye. We'll use Wild Honey and the Spiced Marmalade. And then for a little bit of shading, we'll use Black Soot. We will also be using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to do our basic stamping. And this is our VersaFine Clair. Also today, we will use some of our blending brushes, a paintbrush, and a fine black marker pen. This is actually an ink pen that has a very fine tip on it. This will help us to draw in the details on our leaves. We'll need water, as we're going to actually use the paintbrush to paint in the various colors on the owl. When we create our mica paints, I actually just use a small little plastic palette. I keep it in a plastic bag because you can reuse this. Once you mix it up, you can reuse it. So that just helps it to keep it in a little bit more of the liquid state. And you can also just add water to use later on. So once you mix some up, you're not going to waste it. You'll be able to use it again later on. And when we start to put our card together, we will just use a adhesive tape, or you can use a paper glue as well. So let's get started working on our project. All right, let me see if I can show you the sparkle that we're going to get when we create our mica paints. It may not show up quite as well on the camera, but it makes such a lovely effect. So what we're going to start out with is making the art card base. I'm going to go ahead and get out my stamping platform and my art card piece, and I'm going to attach that down to my stamping platform. Now you can probably see I've got a sticky grid down here. I don't like using magnets to hold my cards in place because this allows me a lot more freedom. So this is a really good idea if you don't like using magnets. So what we're going to start out doing is first we're going to stamp our little branch that we've got Ginger standing on. So I am going to just lay that closer to the bottom. And then I'm actually going to take a little bit of scrap paper here and put it around because I don't want to get ink all over my sticky grid. So we'll just do that so that stays nice and clean. So once I get that lined up, we'll go ahead and get it inked up. I'll be using the VersaFine Clear Nocturne. And I did get just a tiny little bit. You get a piece of paper towel here on that. So I'm going to remove that so I don't get it all over my card. Then we'll just close the door down. Make sure we get good, even contact so that we've got a crisp image. All right, and there's our branch. And I'm going to go ahead and really quickly, I like to go ahead and clean my stamps off pretty quickly so if they don't get all stained up. And I just use a baby wipe. So I'm just going to quickly wipe the ink off of my stamp. And now we're going to get our Ginger and lay her so that it looks like she's standing on our branch. Get her lined up. And we will ink her up as well. Nice even pressure. May have to do again, at least where her eyes are, because that is a little bit thicker piece of the stamp, but let's, or more solid piece I should say, but let's just take a look. Oh, actually, she looks pretty good. I may go ahead and do just a hair more on the eyes, but she looks good. You could add a little bit of ink on the eyes. There we go. All right. So now we can go ahead and pull it up off of the stamping platform there. I love stamping platforms because I'm one who likes really sharp, crisp images. And this helps that if I don't get one that's as crisp as I like, I can always restamp it. Okay. Now, at this point, we're not going to add on our leaves just yet, but we're going to go ahead and add the sky background, which is with the stormy sky. And I'm just going to lightly do it around ginger and the branch, because since I'm going to be painting those in, I really don't want the blue to be showing through. That's why I didn't put a background down first. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that stormy sky and lightly go around the edges of the stamps. I'm not going to put it down too dark. I like to just have a light sky background. This is kind of, to me, looks a little bit like a nice autumn sky. It doesn't have to be nice and solid, because I like the look of it being like clouds, like a cloudy sky or variation in the sky, instead of being just as solid as we can possibly make it. This to me makes it just a little more realistic. All right, so like I said, I'm only doing very light a little bit. I don't want a super dark sky. You can always do whatever you like. All right, there we go. So we've got just a nice light sky in the background. And so now we're going to go ahead and move on to putting the color on the owl and the branch. Now I like to do a watercolor so that I can get a whole lot of variation in the colors of the browns to give it some shade and some realism to it. So we're going to start out with the tea dye. What I'm going to do is put just a little bit of the tea dye down on my work surface. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but I'm just wanting a very light little coloring right now, because I'm going to do the feathers that are right here on her chest. And this is just going to be the background color. So we're just going to paint the tea dye just to get a very nice light little bit of a base color down. So that doesn't take too much, just to get that little base down. Then I am going to go ahead and move on to our vintage photo. Put a little bit of that out there. That's also a lighter color, so it's not going to show up quite as much. Take a little bit of water, pick some of that out, and then I'm just going to kind of dab it in randomly, just to give a little bit of shading. And again, that doesn't take a whole lot. All right. And while we've got the vintage photo out, actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start and do the base color of the owl, and I'm going to go ahead and use brush corduroy. It's just a little bit lighter color, and will be a very good base. So let's go ahead and wipe up our surface here that we're working on. Put a little bit of the brush corduroy down. A little more water. And then I'm just going to give her a base. I'm going to paint everywhere except around her eyes and on the big feathers over her eyes. So now we're going to go ahead and start adding in some darker browns. And I know it seems like we may have a lot of browns that we're using. We've got the Vintage Photo, we've got the Walnut Stain, and we've got the Ground Espresso. But I believe that by giving it a lot of different colors and shadings, you really get the depth and the reality of it. So let's move on and let's just add, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe out my brush just a little bit here. We're going to start out by adding just a little bit of Vintage Photo. And this is just going to kind of be little dashes of it, I guess you would say. Because we do want still some of the lighter feather colors to show through. So this is just basically a very random adding of color. And I'm literally just dabbing it around in little spaces. Okay. Then we will go ahead and put just a little bit of the Walnut Stain, which is just a little shade darker. Has a little bit more of a orange to the Walnut Stain, so it's going to give a little bit even more of a different touch of color. And again, you're just going to randomly put it in. And now she's starting to get a little bit more dimensionality. Now with this one, I'm also going to do just a little bit on the chest to give a little bit of shading. Right around the feathers so that it gives it a little depth. And now we will go ahead and go to our final color, which is the Ground Espresso. This is a nice dark brown. And we'll just do some finishing touches with our dark brown. With the dark brown, I also like to kind of put it around the eyes again to add a little bit of depth. And then just some nice, again, random. I'm going to put some right up here closer to around her top feathers again to help us give the shadowing and the depth. Okay, let's see if I can get this a little closer for you to see the different layers of the brown that we've got there. Now, if you ever feel like it's too random, you can always go back, especially with a lighter color, say like the Vintage Photo, and do a very, very fine wash. So let me kind of clean out my brush and show you what I mean. So get a whole lot of water on your brush and then just barely tap it. And then what this does is this allows you to just blend just a little bit, still retaining all of your colors. But by doing this, it blends them. So you've still got the variations in the shading, but they blend and smooth together just a little bit better. All right. So now let's go ahead and move on to the space around the eyes. I'm going to actually spray my brush and on top of my paper towel here to just kind of clean it off, because we are going to a lighter color. All right, let's cover up this one, and we're going to grab our wild honey. Put some wild honey down, a little fresh water, and then we are just going to take this wild honey color and do the eye around the eyes and our great big feathers. All right, and now it's the same thing. In order to make sure that we've got plenty of depth there, we're going to just take a little bit of brown, not very much dark. We'll go ahead and go with the Vintage Photo. And again, this is just the process where you want to give a little bit of the realistic and a little depth. So we're just going to put a little bit just right around, just underneath the eyes, and a tiny little bit maybe at the base of the feathers. Just so that it's not so flat with one color. All right, now we can go ahead and paint the feet and the beak. We're going to do those with our spiced marmalade. The feet probably don't show up a whole lot because she is standing on the branch. But we still want to put that orange in there. And then her little beak. All right, and now we've got Ginger done. And then we're basically just going to do the same process, and we'll only use about 2 colors on our branch. So we will start out with a lighter color like the Vintage Photo. Just going to lightly coat that branch with a base brown of the Vintage Photo. Then we'll come back in with the walnut stain to add the shadows to that one. Just a little variation there in the colors. And if you want to concentrate it more around the base, where the bottom of the branch would be, so we'd obviously have a little bit more shadowing down there, then you can do that. Again, that's just to give a little bit of a more realistic look. All right, and then for the final thing on our branch and owl, since she is standing on a branch, we want to cast her shadow down underneath. So we're just going to take a little bit of the black soot. And just put a little bit right underneath her on the branches. And that way it looks like we've got her shadow casting. All right. So now we are ready to go ahead and move on to our leaves and painting with the mica. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and stamp our leaves around the owl. And then we will mix up our mica paint, and I'll show you how to paint the leaves. So we're just going to place our artwork back down onto the stamping platform. And I'm going to go ahead and again put my paper down so that I preserve my background, my stamping grid. That's the nice thing about this grid paper, is that it does last for quite a few usings. It stays sticky a long time. So we're going to take our leaves and just place them randomly around. I do like to kind of keep a little bit of openness on one side, not have it completely around. I just like the way that looks, but you can do your leaves any way that you like. Okay, so now that we have got our leaves down, we are going to take our cardstock piece up and we will start working on the painting process. We don't need our stamping platform, so we will set it aside. And I'll cover this one up, and we are ready to start. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how to create the mica paint. I'm going to go ahead and do it with a different color, since I can keep the paint to use over and over again. So like I said, I just got this nice little plastic, inexpensive palette here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our Sweet Poppy mica gum. Let me see if I can zoom in on that without it going too much out of focus. And some mica. So what I've got is I've got a very tiny little thing that came with my mica, but just any small little tool will work. And you're not going to take very much. I mean, it's just literally a very tiny little bit of the gum. and just place it into the well. Then I'm going to go ahead and clean off the gum that's on my little piece, because I'm going to go ahead and use this for getting out my mica. Now this is probably, I don't even know if it's a quarter of a teaspoon. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to get a little scoop. It's almost like the same thing, almost around a quarter of a teaspoon. Might not even need that much. You can always add more if you'd like to. And we're just going to dump that in. I'm going to put my lid back on because I'm famous for spilling things. And then we're just going to mix it up. I'm just going to stir it around, and you're going to see that you're going to come up with the nice consistency of paint. Now, if you feel like you've gotten it a little too thick, you can always add just a little bit of water, just a little squirt in there, and that will thin it down. If you feel like you don't have it as thick as you'd like for it to be, then you can always just add a tiny little bit more of the mica. But that's it. That's all it takes, is just a little bit of the gum and a little bit of the mica. Now, since I've already got my colors that I'm going to be using today made up, then I don't have to worry about mixing up some more, because like I said, I'm going to be able to do a lot of more projects on this. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to go ahead and stir them up. And as you can see, that's kind of thick. So I'm just adding a little bit of water. And I'll stir it around. It's still a little thick. I may take my paintbrush, scoop that off, and stir it with the brush until it gets loosened back up. If you can see that now it's back to its fluid state. Go ahead and wipe off my brush before I go in and add just a little bit of water to my green and stir it up to get it freshened up again as well. I actually ended up getting a little bit of the yellow in there, so it'll make it a slightly lighter green. Add a little more water. And now I've got them back to the consistency that I would like for them to be. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and zoom this back out a little bit. And wipe up my surface, because I got it just a little wet before we lay our card back down. Now you can decide where you want to do your colors on your leaves. I've decided I like to have just like maybe 4 or 5 that are green that I just haven't turned yet, and then the rest I'm going to do the yellow and the orange. So let's get started with painting our mica onto our leaves. So when we're painting our leaves, what we're going to do is we are just going to go on the inside, and I like to leave a little bit of the black around the edge showing. That just gives it a little definition. And that's basically it. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of the greens, and then I'll go on and move on to the orange and the yellow. So now we're done with our painting with our mica. Like I said, you can keep your mica for a long time. So when you're done, your mica paint, just slide it into a plastic bag and seal it up, and then when you're ready to use it again, then you can just add a little water, mix it up, and be good to go. All right. Now, the last step that we need to do before we put our card together is to do a little bit of detailing on the leaves. You do want to make sure that your leaves are dry, which it dries pretty quickly. If you feel like it's not dry enough and you're in a hurry, I always take my heat tool and just do a little quick once over just to make sure that it's completely dry. Or you can just let it sit for a little bit and come back to this process, to this particular step. So I have this very fine tip black ink pen. And with it, all I'm going to do is go in, and let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to go in and draw little veins into my leaves. That just gives it, again, a little bit more of the realistic look. All right, and so now our piece is ready for us to go ahead and mount on the frame and on the card. So I'm going to take my piece of frame cardstock and just very simply use my running tape here. And then I'm going to mount it. I'm sorry, my head may get in the way here. I just want to make sure that I get it nice and straight. And then we're ready to mount it onto the card base. And like I said, I chose, because I've got like the sparkle of the mica, I chose to use a metallic card base, but you can use anything that you've got that you like. And center that in our card. And there we have our card with the lovely mica. And I wish that the camera could show how gorgeous this color shows up, this mica, to give it a little bit of sparkle. But give it a try and see what you think of it yourself. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. I hope you enjoy this fun fall card featuring Ginger and learning how to use the mica to make some paint. Remember to check out the delbellosdesigns.com website for more tutorials on the design team page. Have a great day.